Hey nerds, this is the official second installment of Coffee and Games. When I had originally decided on this concept, I wanted it to be a vlog to update you guys on what was going on in my life and the content that I was going to cover for the foreseeable future and if it changed. However, I thought it would be fun to sit down with another content creator over coffee or whatever caffeinated beverage they had and discuss the games that we're interested in at the moment. So, if you guys like this idea, make sure to comment down below. And today's guest that we have on Coffee and Games, which is all of a sudden a podcast, is Mukluk. Now, he actually streams and does YouTube videos on Guild Wars 2. And since that's the game that is my current passion, I figured we would start with that. You can check for his links in the description, and he also mentions them in the video too. So thank you guys so much for watching, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. So, we're doing our first episode of Coffee and Games as an actual interview, so we're going to be talking Guild Wars 2, and I'm highly caffeinated, which is always a plus. I don't know if you drink coffee. Do you drink coffee, Muck?
Coca-Cola, so I can match you on caffeine at least.
Close enough. So since I've started playing Guild Wars, I've been checking out a lot of content creators, and I've actually known Muck for a while, and I've popped in and out of his streams, and I always said that I was going to try Guild Wars, and I never did, and I even mentioned it in his Discord, so now that I'm trying it, I figured I'd ask him a couple of questions. So if you wouldn't mind just talking about the stuff that you stream, and when you started playing Guild Wars, and where people can find you.
Hello, I am Mukluk Douglas Bartholomew Reginald Esquire IV. You don't have to remember all of that. My Twitch TV URL is just Mukluk, M-U-K-L-U-K. You can find me there every night after 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I mainly stream Guild Wars 2. I recently started getting into variety, but still I'm kind of known as a Guild Wars 2 streamer by large. I got into Guild Wars 2 soon after launch. I played Guild Wars 1. I wasn't like a diehard fanatic like many other people were, but just because I knew Guild Wars 1, I jumped onto Guild Wars 2 right when it came out. Played it for a few months and got max level, got bored of the game, and I came back to the game a little over 2 years ago, and all the changes they had made since launch, it just really, really hooked me. And so although my character, I run around with all the flashy 8-year-old birthday presents and stuff like that, I've really just been playing it like a diehard fan for the last 2 years. In that time when I started, I was a Twitch streamer with maybe a few dozen viewers each night. Started trying my hand at making guides for the game. I got lucky; they became very popular, and my audience really blew up largely through the Guild Wars 2 community. So. Still stream, still every night, still largely Guild Wars 2. And if you Google just about any Guild Wars 2 question from the last couple of years, one of my guides will probably come up.
So what was the first guide that you made? And how long did it take you to make it once you actually started editing the video?
Okay. The first one, so I came up with a build for no matter what MMO you come from, you probably know what a build is. It's either your traits, your talents, your specializations, whatever you call it. I came up with a unique style of play for the Ranger class, and at the time I called it the 6 stun trap beast because it had 6 different ways of stunning the enemy. You basically just take away their ability to play Guild Wars. And it wasn't a top 1% pick, so it wasn't being recommended by the professionals, but it got me to platinum. And usually to be kind of validated within the community with a PvP build, you have to be able to at least reach that tier. Mm-hmm. And I was, in my mind, there was 2 things I could do. I could either just be greedy and not tell anyone how I was playing and try to get as high as I could, or try to earn some clout with it, And I was a Twitch streamer, so I wanted that clout. So I tried my hand at making a guide. So my first guide was the 6 stun trap beast, and it took a very, very long time to edit because I had no idea what I was doing. I was watching lots of videos on how to make a video on YouTube. So I guess I could say I was self-taught, but of course I was using lots of material resources that was on YouTube on how to use. At the time, I think I was using Lightworks. Do not recommend. I do not recommend that, but that's the software I was using. And it did okay. It got a few thousand views, but for my YouTube, which usually my views were in the double digits at the time, that was a really big deal to me.
Mhm.
And that's kind of when I got the bug, it bit me, and I started making broader guides. Because obviously the only people that care about a PvP ranger build are PvP rangers. So I started making like how to craft, how to start in PvP, how to start in raids, start in World v World, broad strokes, things that would affect way more people. And I like I said, I was lucky, but I found some success in that.
So back to when you originally started, what was your favorite part of that new player experience? Like how and how would you rate the new player experience? Like how the tutorial comes across and all of that, and the actual active combat.
Okay, so I did mention I started it 8 years ago, and it has vastly improved in the 6 year time skip since I came back to the game. For me, talking about my favorite part of the game, it is 100% the combat. There are many other games that you start off and maybe at level 1 you've got to really watch your mana bar. You have to hold still to cast spells. You're just spamming Frostbolt for 10 minutes to kill everything. You know the ones. And maybe they get better 70 hours in. Maybe they get good at max level. There's such a common phrase in some MMOs. The game starts at max level, Bob. You got to grind through that first part. Guild Wars 2 wasn't like that. I was having fun at level 1. For level 1, you could dodge roll to avoid attacks. You could use abilities while moving, except for very, very powerful ones, which are few and far between. There was no staring at your mana bar and sitting down and looking at a book to get it back, which I don't mind if I'm playing Dungeons and Dragons or something. But for this, it was just very fluid, smooth combat system. Like, anything they release for this game, whether it be strikes, dragon response, missions, raids, anything, as long as it's using that combat system, I'm probably going to enjoy myself. Like, that's what keeps me. The second part of your question was about like the new player experience. I'll be the first to admit, the game's not perfect. I love this game. I put a lot of time into this game. It's not perfect. One of its weaknesses is, I think it, a little too early, it goes, all right, here you go, open world. And you can kind of do whatever, and you're like, wait, I still don't know all the basics yet. And it's like, good luck, and they recently, like in the last 6 months, they added a new player's handbook webpage, and they added a set of achievements, which unfortunately right now they're easily missed if you don't go looking for them. And those achievements basically teach you, there's one for like successfully dodge rolling an attack, like evading at the right moment so that you take 0 damage. There's one like, equip something for every slot, simple stuff. But right now they're using the achievements window for that instead of like a proper tutorial thing. It is something that they have said that they want to redo. It's just not at the top of their list right now. But so I would say that aside from the fact that the combat system has just got its hooks in me, the rest of it definitely could be better. I'll be the first to admit that.
Sure. And with the comparison to other MMOs, obviously, you know that my most recent MMO that I played before this was Final Fantasy XIV. I don't know if you've ever even looked at that.
I did. And I tried it for about 20 hours. I spent a few days trying it. There was a month where I tried Albion Online, Elder Scrolls Online, and Final Fantasy XIV all back to back. Now, my time in Final Fantasy XIV, do you want me to talk about that?
I mean, yeah, sure. I was going to ask you about the story portion, because for Final Fantasy XIV, it's very story driven, and then it's unfortunate, especially with what you were talking about, that it's more of a wall at the very beginning. How everyone says, well, the game is great once you get here, which is kind of what I was going to go off of. I was trying very hard to
not mention Final Fantasy.
No, it's okay.
You brought it up because I didn't want your viewers to be like, oh, this guy's just dragging our game through the mud.
No, it's okay. I would love to hear your experience. And then my follow-up question was going to be if you enjoyed any race-specific stories in Guild Wars 2, and if you actually enjoyed any of the chapter stories for the expansions. And without like too much spoiler area, like
sure.
Do you enjoy that portion of the game rather than just like PvP fractals raids and such?
Yes. Okay. So first part of the question, my experience of Final Fantasy XIV. I tried it. there was an offer to like play for free for a month before we start charging you. So I signed into that and I tried it out. And for the first 20 hours, I was largely running around newbie zones and holding still to cast spells and spamming Frostbolt. I made a summoner, and I had this like fox thing that it seemed like the only thing it did was piss off everything in the area and try to get me killed. But the holding still to cast spells, the staring at my mana bar, the largely only having to use 1 to 2 skills for 20 hours, and a pet AI that I really did not enjoy. I really didn't enjoy much. It was a beautiful game. The graphics were amazing. There was a couple of things I specifically remember. I went to town at one point into the main city hub, and I went up to like a tower, and I turned in a quest, and I was like, all right, I need to get back down to the ground. And I tried to just hop the railing and go over the balcony. Invisible wall. I just smacked right into it. I was like, what? And they're like, oh, you can't do that. I was like, okay, because I wasn't used to that level of confinement. So I went back to the staircase, and it was like a spiral staircase. I went halfway down and tried to hop the railing, bounced right off. And everyone's like, yeah, you can't do that. This game has a lot of invisible walls. I'm like, why? So, I wasn't accustomed to that. Because in Guild Wars 2, you want to jump off a cliff, it'll let you jump off a cliff. Like, you can make some dumb decisions and you live or not live with those consequences.
That's my new thing right now, actually, is seeing like if certain heights can kill me, because in 14 there's fall damage, but you can't die. And I was streaming yesterday, and I didn't realize that the dev was in my stream. But he was watching my character, at least in game, and everyone was like pointing him out, and I didn't read chat. And so in /say, I was like, witness me, and jumped off the cliff just to see if I would die. I think I had like 95 health left or something, so it wasn't close enough, but it was just like... You
can. Fun thing, I don't know if you've ever had your health at 0 in Guild Wars 2 yet. You know about downstate? Okay.
I know of the downstate, but I haven't actually experienced it yet. I actually watched critics videos. A lot of people were talking about him, and Chalk is actually the one that started to get me into Guild Wars 2. And so we watched like some of his videos and Albster's, as well as yours. But Albster's was more of just like exploration, and there was a bunch of times where he would just be down and people would try to res him, and then he'd be down again and he wouldn't even like fight. But I haven't experienced it myself yet.
So downstate, essentially your health hits 0, you go into downstate and you get a second hit point bar, and it's bleeding out. Now, anyone can walk up to you, tap the F key, and they basically fill your bar back up, and then they pull you to your feet. Similar in that one regard, it's similar to like Fortnite or Borderlands. Probably closer to Borderlands, because if you get a kill, you rally, which you instantly stand up. Okay. But normal healing spells won't hit you while you're down. Someone actually has to use the run up and tap the key, or use specialized skills for that. Now, if you hit 0 health from anything other than falling, you go into the downstate, and there's a chance you could be saved. Especially if there's nothing near you. For every single class, the 4 key in downstate is bandage, and you heal yourself. But if you hit 0 health from falling, you skip downstate, and you're done. So it's always it's something that gets a laugh out of us in PvP, because in PvP there's nothing to really leap to your death, but there are a few like second story windows where you take minor fall damage. So like if you're fighting an opponent, you get him to 10% health and kick him out the window, and he falls to that last 10%. He skips downstate, and he's just immediately back to spawn. And
that'd usually be fun to like have strats be around, though. Just be like, okay, I need to get him here, do this knockback to make sure that we don't have to worry about that, so that way he can't come back and try to cap the point like as quickly, right?
Absolutely, because there are some classes, Guardian, for example, that have skills that have long cooldown, but it's just like 1 second long channel, you're instantly revived. So you go from downstate back to standing, and there's no like running up and kneeling over you where you're a big fat target in PvP. Well,
that's convenient.
Long cooldown, and of course it's taking up a slot on the bar that they could have had something else there. But if you can abuse the falling damage, you can skip that, and that's like a whole part of the meta game with PvP.
That's neat. I can't wait to get there. I haven't even hit level 10 yet on anything, so that's my goal for this weekend. Is to hit level 10. Oh, and start the story, which was the second half of my question.
Right.
What do you think of the story?
I love it. There are so the way it works, and I'm going to try to do this as spoiler free as possible. As you already made a character, I saw you playing a Char Thief the other day. when you choose it, you choose your background. Like, maybe my dad was this, or my mom was this, or I was raised at the circus, or if you're an Asura, it was like, what college did you go to? What was your first invention? All kinds of stuff. Those will influence your level like 1 through 30 story. So every race and background has their own thing. Now imagine like an upside down pyramid. All these choices are at the bottom and they all start funneling together. So by level 30, everyone, no matter their background, chooses to join one of 3 orders. I'm gonna be really, really general here and just say they're basically strength, stealth. It's like an army, some stealth people, like spies, and then intelligence gatherers. You choose one of those 3. I'll let you discover the rest later. And then from 30 to 80, their stories all start merging, and essentially they're all culminating in a fight with the big bad evil dragon, which was the villain of the original core game. So everything leads up to that. So you could if you leveled every single race and background combination by level 30, all those divergent paths intersect, and then you've all got the same finale. Now, Heart of Thorns and Path of Fire, the 2 expansions, those were a bit different because everybody had already all come together, and I think that they just decided that it would be a lot less dev work if they just put all their energy into one good story instead of a lot of stories with replayability. So Heart of Thorns and Path of Fire, you start them at level 80, and all the content's at level 80. That was another thing. For any of your viewers who might not know, Guild Wars 2 doesn't do the thing that like World of Warcraft is known for doing, where every time there's a new patch, they raise the max level, they raise the gear level, and all that stuff. Guild Wars 2, you hit 80 pretty quick, and then they just keep adding more stuff to do. They do horizontal progression. So every raid boss that's ever been a threat, you don't just go back and kill it in 2 hits to try to farm a mount. You can't do that. It's still a threat. There's still a threat and real legitimate content. But yeah, for me, I loved the core story. I had maybe one qualm with it, but it would be spoilery, so I won't talk about it. But it was good. It was good. Heart of Thorns was frustratingly beautiful. Heart of Thorns, it's a labyrinth. Imagine like a jungle with like multiple, like literally on the mini map, you can choose the elevation you're looking at. It's like you're looking at floors on an elevator, and it's just like living vines and trees all trying to kill you, and the whole thing's a freaking 3-dimensional labyrinth. It is rip your hair out, but beautiful. And then Path of Fire was a massive desert, but the story in that one, one of the videos on my channel is called 3 Times Guild Wars 2 Gave Me Chills, and all 3 of them are in Path of Fire. It was my personal favorite. There was some very awesome moments in that. But yeah, I'm trying so hard not to spoil it, but also answer the question. But yeah, big fan. It's
okay. It's just funny, like, because coming from something that's so much more story driven to an MMO where the story is there, and yes, you can do it to progress, but you don't necessarily have to level, where it's not gated behind story, if that makes more sense.
Right.
Or like the other things that you actually want to do in the game. So like crafting and gathering, or you guys call them disciplines?
We say crafting and gathering. The game might say disciplines. I promise you the community says crafting. But yeah, you can craft your way all the way to 80 if you have the resources. Yeah, that's what people were saying.
So with that said, and going back to your first video being about a build that you were interested in that you wanted to show other people, especially for like people that were ranger mains. How do you feel when people say that certain professions are only core tanks? Not that they're effective tanks, but that you can only play this as a tank, and there's only one meta build. How do you feel about that? Do you agree? Do you disagree? And what's your favorite build if you have one for a class or profession?
So first of all, to kind of refine your question, you said, how do you feel when people say this? Do you mean when people say that in Guild Wars or just like in any game?
In Guild Wars specifically, just because I feel like everything is more of a hybrid where there are certain builds that you can essentially make anything work. Like how a warrior doesn't necessarily have to be a tank. A warrior can shout heal, right? So, but people will say that they're not necessarily that they're effective at tanking, that you really should in certain situations like this certain PvP that you should only play a warrior like this with this build because it's the meta. So do you agree that there are metas like that, or that things can be like overcome in certain situations while playing a healer, and that there's like different builds for being a shout healer, just like for a warrior for an example, but you could choose whatever you'd like.
Okay. So to answer that, I want to briefly touch on when Guild Wars 2 first came out, it did not have what people call the Holy Trinity, which is tank, heal, DPS.
Mm-hmm.
It was just, everybody was just an adventurer. They were all pretty well rounded. Everybody, the number 6 key is a heal skill. If you got popped, you could use the heal. If you got popped again, well, you might be dead. That was it. That was it. People tried to make some weird heal builds there because there was gear that had like healing power that made your heals more powerful. And a few of them splashed the area around you. One of the ranger heal skills is healing spring, which makes like a small geyser erupt at the ground and everyone in the area gets regeneration. But that wasn't enough to be healing through a boss punching you in the face. So later on, when they added Heart of Thorns and Path of Fire, they added Elite Specializations, which essentially was just more options. You don't have to use them, but they're there. As a ranger, I could become a soul beast, which can temporarily merge with the spirit of their animal companion, and you get more abilities. Like you can claw, you can spit acid, bite, whatever. Or you could become a druid, which is similar to a D&D druid. You've got healing abilities and stuff like that. So suddenly there were supports in the game when they did that. Guardians can become a firebrand, which can heal. Elementalists can become a tempest, which uses a lot of water magic and can heal. The druid I already mentioned, and then there's many others. Now each one had different pros and cons. The druid has a unique thing where many of its abilities hit 10 targets. Most friendly abilities in the game hit 5. So although the druid's not great for 5-man content, it'll get the job done, but it's okay. But in 10-man content, it suddenly shines because it can buff group 1 and group 2 at the same time.
Right.
Whereas not many, it's a strength that is unique to that class. So the game originally didn't have the tanks and the healers, but now it does. But even though it does, there's many raid bosses that don't even need a tank. The bosses in my mind, I'll if I'm like arguing with someone, I'll be like, all our bosses are smarter. I mean, in like World of Warcraft, Onyxia will swing at the gnome and plate for 30 minutes if it, and everyone else shoots her in the backside.
I think and
that's it. That she never turns around. In this game, the boss hits who it pleases. If it's not a tank boss, the boss will literally just turn and target random people with abilities. Sometimes it's the closest, sometimes it's a random one, but it's a lot of just like, oh, he looked this way, dodge roll and get behind him, and he's just constantly spinning and swinging at you, and you're just orbiting him and trying to pick him apart like a bunch of ants fighting a Dark Souls boss or something. Having a little bit of a brain dump here. So you mentioned like about class builds.
Yes.
So there are absolutely some builds, like in any game where you've got talents and traits and stuff like that, there is going to be mathematically, this does the most damage, this takes the best hits. Like that's always going to be a thing. Do you have to play that way? No, you don't. And I often encourage people because I feel like there's so many people that are borderline like gatekeeping, like, oh, you can't come in raids unless you blah 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 blah. Shut up. But like. You could clear the raids playing any number of ways. But if you wanted to, if you were doing like speed running, yeah, sure, squeeze it out to the last drop, but that's not necessary for the average person. And I try to explain that because people are so used to the people I talk to all the time. Because like my guides, I feel like I run the elementary school for Guild Wars 2. Like I'm just like, there's the class for crafting, there's PvP, whatever. And people ask about like getting into raids, and I'm like, well, you want to download this damage meter, and they recoil immediately. They're like, I don't want a DPS. I'm like, no, listen. I'm not going to kick you out or anything. The boss, you have 10 minutes to kill it, and then he one-shots everyone. Like you do have to at least do enough damage to beat that timer.
Exactly.
Now, if you beat it in 9 minutes, that's fine. But if you can beat it in 5, that's 4 less minutes of you possibly making a mistake and killing everybody.
Right.
So, there is stuff like that. But you said, is there classes where you can only play it one way?
Yes.
I honestly can't think of one. Like a ranger, there you can be in end game raiding.
Mhm.
It's either you're usually a healing druid, and there's a few different builds, or you're a DPS soul beast. But talk about like some weird stuff I did once. I wanted to see if I could. I saw a Tempest tank a boss and heal their raid at the same time. And I was like, I gotta
That's
try
cool.
that. So I went in there on my druid, and it was tough. Like my attention was very split. I was tanking the boss, so I was the only tank in the raid. I was
Mhm.
also one of the 2 healers in the raid, so I was healing myself and also 4 other people. And also, you know, as a ranger, I've got like an animal companion.
Right.
I had brought an animal companion that has immobilize. It can basically root an enemy. There's this ad that spawns and comes toward the boss, and if it reaches the boss, bad things happen. So I was tanking the boss, healing my group, and remote controlling my pet to root that guy over there. And I was just juggling all 3 of those the whole time. It was such a nerd rush, you know. I
That's
had
awesome.
the nerd adrenaline was really flowing that day. Now, if I were to do that same boss on its challenge mode, which if you come from WoW, it'd be like heroic or mythic rating or something,
Yep.
that stunt would not have flown. Like I wouldn't have been able to do all that. In fact, I'm not even sure if a druid can tank that fight on its challenge mode, but on normal, yeah, I could do all of that. And it was really cool. I had never played an MMO where I could tank and heal at the same time. That blew my mind. Like I was so flabbergasted that I was able to pull that off.
That's awesome. So, what do you have like a favorite race in class combo that you like to play, or like a favorite build with that you like to play?
I've got 5,000 hours of Guild Wars 2, and 4,000 of them are on my Ranger, which is an Asura.
Yeah.
Most of my characters are Asura, which are those little goblin-looking guys.
Mhm.
I think they're funny to look at. They like you dodge roll and they do like 2 backflips. It's
Yep.
like that early Star Wars episode where Yoda started bouncing off the walls. It's like that. So I love it. I think they're aesthetically funny, and at this point, I'm in all of my video guides. My Asura wearing a big wizard's hat is talk emoting in the guides,
Yes.
and so
I've
people will
seen
now
those.
recognize me through that. So I'm like, all right, well, this is a thing now. I'm not going to change it. So the Asura is my favorite race. Ranger is my favorite class. I'm drawn to pet classes in any game I play. If there's a necromancer with skeletons, an elementalist with elementals, an engineer with robots, whatever. If you could have like minions, that's my jam. So I really like the Ranger the most, and the Necromancer the second most. But Ranger, like I said, 4,000 hours. That's my favorite.
Yeah.
Favorite build. I really like running Druid. I'll run Soul Beast if I have to. Druid is very much a healer, but despite that, it works in PvP as well as someone who's really, really annoying. And what I'm trying to explain by that is imagine you're fighting someone and they root you to the ground every 2 seconds.
Mhm.
That'd be really frustrating, especially if you're melee and you keep trying to get close to them.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
even though the druid's not doing really, really high damage, if he's just picking you apart and your feet are super glued to the floor, you might lose that fight. So I can play that in PvP, and I can play it as a healer in PvE, and it's very enjoyable for both, for me.
And so, with that said, as far as like PvP, world PvP, and fractals and things like that, you mentioned the game being very end game being like very like horizontally, based. So like when a new expansion comes out, like it's that content that's still relevant, but you don't have to worry about leveling up even further. So a lot of people have said that they dislike that because they think that the whole experience of the game and getting to 80 is great, but that once you actually hit that end game, that there's kind of a wall, that they don't think there's an end game. Have you ever felt that way? Was that a reason that you've taken a break, or do you have like a cure for that, something that you do to make it so that you don't feel that way and can continue to play?
I would say I understand their sentiment. And it definitely, so I myself, you asked me about this earlier and I forgot to answer it. So it's relevant now. You asked me what other MMOs I've played. I played EverQuest for 7 years, World of Warcraft for 10, and off, I played Guild Wars 1, Rift, Black Desert Online. Like I said, I tried Elder Scrolls Online, Final Fantasy 14. Dozens of others I've tried.
Mm-hmm.
WoW for 10 years, EverQuest for 7 are the big ones. So I get it. I get constantly needing that cookie of a new item dangling in front of me to move forward. I understand that drive. And it definitely took a different mindset. It's like, in WoW, I would log in and I got to do my dailies or I'm going to get behind everybody, stuff like that. Guild Wars 2, it's like I could log in and I could do whatever I want. And gear is not the thing. So it's like, I can play for fun, and that's like a whole weird thing. So like, you're Guild Wars 2, you hit level 80 and suddenly, the world is your oyster. You could work on raids, strike missions, dragon response missions, fractals, dungeons, PvP. Well, you could start that at like level 10. World versus world, which is just massive scale PvP with siege machines and stuff. You got all of these things you could do. And I think some people are just like, they're overwhelmed because there's just so many choices. And I do get people that come into the stream, like, hey, Muck, I'm bored. I'm not sure what I should do. And usually my default answer is, have you tried every game mode? I myself, I avoided raiding for years. And then I tried it because of a legendary item. Oh, that's another fun thing. Some people need something to work on. Legendary items are great for that. What those are is, you've seen the early tiers of equipment. There's like, you'll get like an item, like a knife, then you'll get a knife that's got like +5 to agility on it or strength or whatever. And then, there's like more stats as you go on.
Stuff. Yeah.
And the top tier of equipment is called Ascended. And that, it's got the stats just like your current stuff, but the numbers are bigger. And that's it. There are no items with higher like if you've got an Ascended item with plus to strength, there's no item that's going to have more strength than that Ascended item for that slot. However, there's another thing above that called Legendary. Same exact numbers as Ascended, but you can stat swap whenever you want. So you've essentially got, so let's say you've got an Ascended breastplate. It can become the best tanking piece of armor, the best healing piece of armor, the best DPS piece of armor for dots or power, the best critical strike, any stat combination that exists in the game, and there's like 30 of them. It's just a drop-down menu. So essentially, you've gotten every piece of Ascended armor in that one item for that slot.
Right.
Now, making a piece of legendary gear is not required because you could just use the Ascended stuff and you're fine, especially if you only play one build. But it's nice if you swap different builds just to have one set of gear. And also, it's really fancy. It's really fancy. We're talking like a sword where the blade is made out of the night sky. Like you swing it and you see the sky behind it.
That's cool.
Armor that when you enter combat, you transform like Optimus Prime and it just down your, stuff like that. Like that's the legendary stuff. It's flashy. It shows off. You're like, hey, look what I freaking did, and if you're starting, like if you just hit 80, you don't have any of the like end game resources. Each piece of this could take you weeks to months. They're long-term projects. For me, I loved it. I came from EverQuest, so I consider myself a very patient gamer. Like, sit down for 5 minutes to regain my mana seems like a fair deal. Stuff like that. So, I almost am fully equipped in legendaries, and it was a very, very long process. But yeah, if you need the cookie dangled in front of you for the end game, legendaries are a great long-term project. Because like just if you're like, I'm going to get a full set of legendaries, there's your next year.
Nice. So I was just wondering, because that was a lot of what people had said in my videos. They're like, oh, well, I'm so glad you're enjoying everything, but it kind of dies off once you hit max level. And I was like, really? Like, what do you mean? What do you mean it dies off when you hit max level? Like, I know I'm not going to level anymore, but
yeah, I would assume that they get overwhelmed. But to give you an idea, like you hit max level at the end of the core game. Then there's, assuming you got all the DLCs and stuff, there's Living World Season 2, there's Heart of Thorns, Living World Season 3, Path of Fire, Living World Season 4, and then the current thing, which is called the Icebridge Saga. They shouldn't have, it just confuses people. It's basically Living World Season 5. And these Living Worlds are essentially their DLCs. They are just, they're mini expansions.
Right.
So the story, essentially, usually every 3 months, they add more zones and more story to the game. It's 4 times a year is how often they usually do it. And so the story keeps going constantly. We're nearing the end of the Icebridge Saga, after which we are supposed to get the End of Dragons, the 3rd expansion, which is on its way out.
That trailer looks awesome. I know it's just a teaser, but the dragon that's actually in the trailer, I was just like,
Oh yeah. So the End of Dragons, it was a major nostalgia trip for anyone who played Guild Wars 1. Guild Wars 1 had an expansion called Factions, and it was in a continent called Cantha. And this is us going back there. So anyone who played that section of Guild Wars 1 are just like, oh, nostalgia trip for them. So it really is hitting them hard. But yeah, so there's a lot of story, which they keep adding onto.
Mhm.
They keep adding zones to the world map. There's the like I said, the strike missions, the fractals, the raids, PvP and World v World. There truly is a lot to do, but I would say those people probably, they got to max level, they looked around, there was probably a lack of a sense of direction, or maybe they were just overwhelmed by so many options and no direction, and they were just like, well, I guess there's nothing to do,
Right.
That would be my assumption.
And actually going off of that with all of the extra chapters, how you said there's like 4 per year, and then it's like DLC. How did you ever get questions about the idea that you were playing something that's free to play, that you have to pay for those things, even though you can grind in game to get the gold to pay for those things? Because it's one of the questions that I get a lot, where it's like, okay, well, if you play this game, how do you feel about having to purchase everything? Or how do you feel about loot boxes? And for me, it's kind of like, as long as it's something that doesn't change the gameplay for me, like an in-game store, as long as it's something that doesn't affect me, that I don't absolutely need to have, I don't care. And to compare on the DLC with other things is, it's like, well, you'll buy like a $60 game for PlayStation or whatever, like PS5, and then there's like that $30 DLC down the road that nobody cares about. But when you have a free-to-play game that doesn't have a subscription and you buy it, all of a sudden everybody cares if there's things that you have to purchase, like these chapters. So I was just wondering what your take was on it, especially for someone new, like coming into the game. Like, what can they expect, or what can you expect to do if you wanted to, get that by farming gold in game, things like that? Because you can purchase everything with gold in game, right? Like pretty much everything.
So nearly. I absolutely know what you're talking about. Essentially, the only things you cannot purchase with in-game gold by just farming gold in game is Heart of Thorns and Path of Fire, the 2 expansions.
Right.
You get Heart of Thorns for free when you buy Path of Fire. Yes. Path of Fire is $30 US dollars if you're watching this from another country, and it is frequently, every couple of months, they'll have it on sale for a few days, 50% off. So you can frequently get all the expansions for $15 total, and the core game is free. And there's not many MMOs that let you play all the way to maximum level for free. So that's really nice. That's really nice. Like last time I checked, WoW let me go to like 20 before it starts to charge you. Stuff like that.
It's still like at that point.
Yeah. And then like, the other games, they might give you like a month to play for free, and then you might not even be able to reach the good part within that month, depending on your time. Now the living world stuff, the way I'm actually, one of the things on my idea sheet right now is making a video called WTF is Living World, because I get this so many times. But essentially it's, I love this game. I love ArenaNet. If I'd say that their biggest weakness, if they have one, is the marketing. They make stuff needlessly complex, and I make a living right now straightening it out. But the living world, it's basically DLCs. They're free when they come out. I'm not sure if you already knew that part, but if you log in within a month of a release, it's added to your account for free.
Oh, I actually didn't know
that. When the last release happened, last Tuesday, a mini release happened, and you log in since then, you've got that chunk of the Icebrood Saga on your account, whether you realize it or not. That's already unlocked.
That's neat.
Now, the stuff that you pay for is any living worlds that were in the past that you missed. You can unlock those with gems, and gems can be gained with either gold from in-game or your local currency. So you can, like, my son plays Guild Wars 2 on his own account sometimes, and he wanted to play through the story. I just threw down $10 and got him the living worlds. It wasn't a big deal to me. Like, we get so much playtime out of these games that throwing down $10 for the DLC was like, whatever. Right. But yeah, for a game where you could play the core game for free, the first expansion's free if you get the second. There's no monthly subscription, and everything else you could just get with gold. It doesn't bother me. I could see how some people might be bothered by it, but yeah. That it gives you a lot for very, very little. And then what you mentioned about the gem store in game, I've got multiple videos on this thing as well. It's either cosmetic or quality of life. You will never lose a fight because the other guy spent money on the cash shop.
Yeah.
It's not, Black Desert Online. Oh, absolutely, you would. But
I haven't tried that yet.
The other guy might die looking more spectacular than you did because he looked very fashionable or something.
Right.
But the cash shop, it's cosmetic stuff. There are a few quality of life items. For example, there's an item in game called a salvage kit. I don't know if you've seen it yet. You basically can break an item and get the base materials such as wood or metal,
which is really cool. I actually did see that.
Right. There is after you use it enough times, the salvage kit breaks. You have to go get another one. There's an item in the cash shop that is a salvage kit with infinite uses. As far as quality of life goes, it's really nice never having to replace that again. It's a minor convenience. It's not game breaking if some guy you're fighting in PvP has an infinite salvage kit.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so there's no power ups or anything like that in there.
Yeah. Which is kind of like whenever I'm asked that question, because obviously I haven't even thought about purchasing any of the chapters for any of these because I haven't gotten there yet. But whenever people ask, they're like, oh, how do you feel playing a game this way that's free to play? And I'm like, okay, well, there's a difference between free to play and pay to win. And so far, I haven't felt like it's pay to win. So I guess my answer to your question is mainly if it doesn't concern me and I don't feel like spending the money, I don't necessarily have to unless I want the story stuff. And even then I can get it with gold. So, but I was just wondering what your take was on it. So I guess I've taken up almost an hour of your time. So if there was anything else that you would have, like any advice or anything to that effect that you would want to give to anyone that's just starting with Guild Wars 2 or has maybe hit a wall and doesn't know where to go in Guild Wars, but just like anything that you wanted to just let people know about that you think maybe hasn't been brought to light and is a cool feature in the game that not a lot of people do.
I mean, I could give mountains and mountains of advice as showcased by the hundreds of videos I've made on the game. If you're getting new to the game, I have a new player's guide. There's a past me will talk your ear off for 30 minutes telling you all the ins and outs of the game if you're interested in that. It truly, as someone who's played I've tried almost every MMO on the market for some period of time. It is my personal belief, and I'm not going to fight you on this. You disagree with me, I'm going to say whatever. But it is my personal belief that it truly is the best MMO, especially for the cost, which is almost non-existent. The combat system, I cannot get enough of it. It's not a perfect game. I won't act like it is, but it is my favorite. It is wonderful. And if you need any help on that, I have got a playlist with a mountain of guides ready to help you out, or you can ask me questions anytime.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And if you just want to let people know where they can find you again, I will be all set.
I am live every single night after 7 p.m. Eastern time on twitch.tv/Mukluk. And my main YouTube channel with the guides I mentioned is Mukluk YouTube. Don't just go to Mukluk on YouTube because that is a shoe shop, apparently. They beat me to it. So Mukluk YouTube on YouTube for the Guild Wars 2 guides.
Awesome. Thank you.